there everybody, Matt O'Ree back here with you. Once again, welcome back to Mob on TV, the official Matt O'Ree Band YouTube channel. If you haven't clicked subscribe, please do so. Also hit that little bell button so you'll know when I upload new videos, you'll get notifications on it. So we're back with the mini-series of Tech Talk. This is episode number 5, and today we're dealing with pedalboards, and we're going to be examining and talking about my main pedalboard that I've gigged with and tour with. So let's jump into it. Here we go. So this is my main pedalboard that I've been gigging and touring with for at least the last 10 years. Prior to this board, I had a much bigger pedalboard, a lot more pedals involved. And on one of our tours out to Seattle, I had checked it in baggage on the airline. And we got to the first gig and the pedal board crapped out. And it was kind of a nightmare to try to find the problem. So when I had gotten back from that tour, I decided to take a break from pedal boards while I was rebuilding my old one. And I had noticed over the time that I spent without a pedal board, I was just using a Tube Screamer and at the time a Comet 60 amplifier. I noticed that I felt like I was playing much better, just I guess because I was less distracted by having the option to turn on this pedal or so forth, or all the ear candy that came with that board. As much as I loved it, I actually found myself playing, I think, better without a big setup. And of course there was a lot less problems too. If a pedal board is built correctly, you shouldn't have any problems at all. But every once in a while there could be a hiccup. So getting used to just playing back to a Tube Screamer and my amp, I really enjoyed it for a while. So after a few years, I decided, you know what, let me build another pedal board, but I want to do something smaller. It's a little bit easier to travel with. If I have to put it in baggage, it's less, hopefully less money and weight if they're charging for weight. So this is the pedal board that I came up with, and the case was built by a good friend of mine, Greg, out in Colorado, who did a lot of my road cases. Sadly, he passed away, but he really did an absolute fantastic job on all my cases, and he did some real cool trick things on this one, which we'll get into in a second. So let's take a look underneath the hood. This particular pedal board, of course, made it all the way to China and back on the Bon Jovi tour that I did a few years back. So looking at it first glance, it seems like there's some things going on, but in reality, this pedal board is nothing more than just a wah-wah pedal, a Tube Screamer, and a signal router. That's pretty much it. So when I went back to building this new pedal board after coming off of a bigger pedal board, and I really envy all the guys out there that went down that road of a pretty elaborate pedal board, and it really seems to work for a lot of people. Hopefully they have better success than what I had with my old one, but then I was running old vintage effects, and as they get older, they start to have more issues, especially when traveling, on an airline and getting bunked around, in cargo. So with this pedal board, I went back to some of the live recorded tones that I was familiar with that I really loved, and one of those shows is the Live at the El Macombo from Stevie Ray Vaughan. And Stevie back then in '83 was using a vintage wah-wah pedal, a Vox wah in this case, a Tube Screamer, and then 2 Fender amps. And I always thought that the tone on that recording was just about the best that I've ever heard. So I kind of took that lesson of what he was doing, and I wanted to do that same thing in this pedal board. But there's a few extra things in it, as we can see. So let's jump into the signal flow. It starts by plugging into my 1967 Vox Clyde McCoy wah. This is a signature wah, meaning that the original backplate of this wah would have been written Clyde McCoy in script, not the slightly earlier version of 67 with the picture of him on the back of it. This wah does have a changed pot, and it has been worked on by this guy Kyle Chase at chasetone.com. Kyle is an absolute genius when it comes to wahs. I actually had the inductor break in this wah, and I tried everything under the sun with new inductors, and it never sounded right. But Kyle was able to pull the old inductor apart and fix the break in the wire and put it back together. I got it back, and voila, it's exactly as it's always sounded, this is really my favorite sounding wah that I have. So out of the wah is George L. Cable in the 155 vintage red version of their cable. The red is just a color, it doesn't have anything to do with tone, but it's their 155 cable, which is a lot thinner and it's easier to wire a pedal board with it. Nowadays, there's a bunch of different cable companies out there that do something similar for cables for pedal boards to make it easier. I really love the George L. cable. I love the way it sounds. I use it with their unplated brass ends. So for my amplifier of choice, which is Trainwreck amplification, I believe that the unplated brass ends sound the best. They complement the amplifier the best. So all of my plug ends for my cables are all unplated brass. So out of the wah-wah into the Sonic Research Turbo Tuner. I can't say enough about this tuner. I really, really love it for numerous reasons. One, it doesn't take up a whole lot of room on the pedal board. Two, if you're using it standalone on an acoustic gig perhaps, the 9-volt battery lasts a long time in the pedal. Some tuner pedals really like to eat batteries. This one does not. It's also a strobe tuner, and I've put it neck and neck with my Peterson strobe tuner, and it runs simultaneously and flawlessly. It also is an extremely fast tuner, meaning that it locks onto the note very quickly, and when you're trying to tune up in between a verse or a chorus or between songs, seconds really count in a show. You can't have it be minutes of trying to tune up your guitar if something goes out of whack. And this tuner is extremely fast. You can play 16th notes through it, and it pretty much recognizes every note. Amazing. And the accuracy, and its true bypass, so that's the next part of my signal chain. Okay, out of my Sonic Research Turbo Tuner, it goes to my Tube Screamer from Ibanez. It's a TS-808 model, a reissue that was modified by Robert Keeley back when he was modifying them. A killer sounding Tube Screamer. Looking at the settings of the Tube Screamer, you might wonder why I'm even using it. I left it in the pedal board for two reasons. Actually three, really, back to the Stevie Ray Vaughan obsession. Also, I use it for single coil pickups, especially the Dan Electro with the lipstick tube pickups. That's a lot to say. I use this Tube Screamer more as a clean boost, but we all know with the Tube Screamer, it kind of lops off the low end frequencies and gives it more of that mid-range hump. It actually works really well for my Dan Electro. It also works really well for a backline type of situation. So if I use my pedal board with backline gear, I usually request an AC30 because I do like those amps a lot. Or if I get a Marshall or a Fender, at least I have something in my pedal board that I can run with that amp to get some tones that I'm comfortable with. So for me, I do use the Tube Screamer once in a while with the Trainwreck amplifiers live, usually with single coil pickups. I run the overdrive all the way off, the tone about 230 and the level about 11 o'clock. So I'm really just getting a different tone shaping to help boost the weaker output of a single coil pickup versus my normal Gibson Les Pauls that I usually gig with. So out of the Tube Screamer, it goes straight to the Layla Dule AB selector switch. This is just a signal router that's passive. I really love the Layla products. I think they're fantastic. It doesn't color the sound much at all. Any pedal board is going to color the sound a little bit. So, but I'm real happy with the way this does it. It doesn't bother me too much at all. So the Layla allows me to be able to A/B between two different amplifiers or run them simultaneously. Again, back to the Stevie Ray Vaughan, running two amps at the same time. I found myself not needing to do that with the Trainwreck amplifiers. So on the one side of it, the A, I have it labeled as Express, and the other side is labeled as Liverpool, which is the other version of the Trainwreck amp that I like to use. So essentially, I'm A-Bing between two different heads, two different cabinets, to get different tones. So I guess I am back to that sort of thing of the larger pedal board. I'm just not doing it with pedals. I'm doing it with amplifiers, and that's a lot more to carry around than the bigger pedal board, but I like the results a little bit better. It works better for me. Again, to each their own. If pedals are your thing, getting a good clean platform amplifier to run them with, I've seen people have great success with that. So again, to each their own. This was my own journey of a pedal board that really works for me. So that allows me to run either A side, B side, or I can put them both on at the same time, which I usually don't. I don't feel the need that I have to with those particular amplifiers. If you need more information on the Trainwreck amplifiers or never heard of them, go back to my Gear Tutorial Season 1 and Season 2, and you'll hear all about them. I covered them pretty extensively. So what's the last pedal on the pedal board? This is just a switching box that I built. The box came from Mammoth Electronics, which I just heard recently that they went out of business. This was sort of a do-it-yourself thing, drilling out the holes myself, putting the LED lighting in it and the jacks. This is just an on-off switching box that has nothing to do with audio. Again, my signal flow goes from the wah to the tuner to the tube screamer to the Layla and then right out to my amps. So this has nothing to do with signal flow. This is only for my built-in tremolo in my Liverpool Rocket Trainwreck amp. So I can turn the tremolo on and off, and then on the same amplifier in the bigger shows on my bigger rig, I use a 70s EP3 Echoplex with that Liverpool Rocket Trainwreck amplifier. So this is the on-off switch for that. So there's just two separate jacks out of here that I'll run cables out to those jacks on the amplifier and the Echoplex, so I can control that via the pedal board. Let's jump back over to cables for a second. So I did talk about the two output jacks of my switching box and the two output jacks of the Layla. Here shown in the video is some snake cables that I made out of, again, George L. Cable 155 series unplated brass ends on everything. I explained that before. And it was pretty easy to work with this cable to create a snake cable, so a two-channel, essentially, snake coming out of my pedal board and then running back to the amplifiers with this plastic mesh loom that I found online. It was really easy to make. Again, the thinner cable's easier to work with to get it into this mesh, and it's held up really great over the tours too. Notice also how George L. makes different colored ends, so you can color code the cables, so when you go to plug them into the appropriate amplifiers, you know which end goes where. Also, I did take the time to listen to each cable. This might sound a little crazy, but cables do have a direction to them. This is something that I noticed with Ken Fisher at Trainwreck, the cables that were at his house, as well as John Mark that now makes the Trainwreck amps. Noticed how I marked the ends with this orange reflective gaffer's tape, so I know that that's the start of the signal flow. I've gone through all my cables that way, including speaker cables, to figure out which way sounds best. Now, is it a sound thing or a feel thing? I would say more in the feel, but there is a tonal difference in at least the George L. cable that I've experimented with, in which direction that they go. So again, marking that so I know, and my tech would know which way the cable actually goes. So this would plug right into the Layla, and then that would be out to my amplifiers accordingly. I also have another one. Now, I always suggest backup cables because cables can fail, especially if they get run over by a road case or such. So this one's just different colors for this end. This is usually the one I use for the switching box, but it also has a power cable attached to it, wrapped together for the power for my pedal board. Now, the other end of that power cable is this. It's a PowerCon interlocking cable that this is how my pedal board actually runs off of or plugs into, which I'll explain that when we get into the innards of the pedal board with the power supply. So the other cables on the board that you might see are the power cables. Now the wah-wah, you don't see a power cable because there is no external DC jack for in an old vintage pedal. And the Tube Screamer, I ran the actually battery snap right out of the trap door down through the pedal. But you'll see it for the tuner, and you see it for the switching box, and you'll see it for the Layla. And what that is for on the switching box is only just to run the LEDs. So what I did is I said, well, I have a lot of George L cable hanging around. I'll just use the George L cable and make my own power cables, which is exactly what I did. Running all the cables down into the pedal board, which is where my power supply actually is, I've noticed that, knock on wood, is that it prevents anything from getting broken during travel, rather than having cables strewn across the top, or some of the other pedal boards that are pedal boards in a road case that you take out of the road case and then you put it back in. Of course, all the wires are underneath it, and there's not much protection on some of those pedal boards. So let's take a look underneath this hood. Okay, well, here's the inside of my pedal board, powered by a Voodoo Lab Pedal Power 2. Yeah, I did nerd out and use a Brother P-Touch to label all the outputs so I know where each one goes, just in case I have a problem on the road. It's a little bit easier to find that problem. You can clearly see the George L 155 cable used for power cables as well. My Tube Screamer is running off of the voltage sag output, and I did dial that in with a voltmeter to figure out, with the Trainwreck amps again, what voltage that the Tube Screamer sounds the best when I do use it. I noticed that a slightly weaker battery, so not a 9.4 volts of a brand new battery, maybe 8.9 or 9 even, tends to sound a little bit better. Again, with my rig, it is a fun experiment to do if you have the time to do it. So pedal power mounted underneath the pedal board, so again, all the cables are protected during transit. Voodoo Lab's been a great power supply. Have no complaints. Really like their products. So the Voodoo Lab is wired into this distribution block that my friend Greg, that made this road case for me, came up with. The idea for that is that I wanted to have two different ways to plug the pedal board in, to be able to route cables a little bit nicer on stage. So sometimes on stage the power might be over here, sometimes it's over here. That way I have two different places to plug the pedal board into, and that power distribution block goes out to the right side and then over to the left side. I talked about it before that it uses a power con connector, so this is a locking end. So when I plug it into the pedal board and turn it, it clicks. There's no way that somebody walking past might trip over the cable that will unplug the pedal board. So it just eliminates more potential issues on stage of the pedal board going out. Of course, your signal, going dead, and in the middle of a song, that could be a big problem. So that's what it looks like in regular Edison plug on the other side. Again, I can plug into either side of the pedal board. So that's pretty much it on the inside of it. One thing that I wanted to mention too, because people have asked me in email, is the order of pedals. And the order of pedals does make a difference, a big difference, in fact, depending on what style of pedals that you're using. Vintage ones sometimes don't cooperate with new ones, so experimenting with the signal flow, if you're doing a multi-pedal board setup, it makes a huge difference. I always prefer the wah-wah as the first thing. After the wah, modulation effects, maybe flanger or phaser, then to overdrive pedals or fuzz and then overdrive, and then to a delay or time-based effects. Some of that order is definitely an experiment, and you have to figure it out for yourself of which one or which order would work better for you. Just because your pedals are arranged a certain way in your pedal board for convenience of turning them on and off doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it has to be wired. Again, with George L cable, promoting them again, with the 155 cable, it's pretty easy to make your own cables and route the cable direction however you see fit. So I hope that helps you guys out as far as the order of pedals. Again, I prefer the wah first, then some modulation if I have them. I don't in this pedal board. And then to a fuzz or the overdrive, and then to time-based effects. Which order works for you, you'll have to figure that out for yourself. So there we have it, folks. Episode number 5 of Tech Talk. Hope you got some info out of that on pedals and the order of pedals and how pedal boards are constructed or different ways to construct them. It's been a long time with me, experimenting with different pedals and of course different configurations. And this pedal board that I'm currently using really just it's just gone the distance for me. So to each their own. Everybody's different. Everybody has different needs. This is the one that works for me right now. So in the future, who knows? I might change it up. But once again, MattoReband.com. Check out our website. Check out our new merchandise. Download our new singles. Check out our tour dates. We might be in a city near you. Come out and say hello. This is the end of the Tech Talk series for right now. We will revisit this, but I'm anxious to jump back into Geartorial season number 3. This is going to be all about pedals once again. So we're tying these two in back to back. I have so many new pedals to demonstrate for you guys. This is going to be a pretty long season of Geartorial 3. It might be 20 episodes. I don't know yet. We'll just take it as it comes, and I'll keep giving it to you guys as I get more pedals. So stay tuned. Again, hit that little bell icon so you'll know when that whole new series starts. MattoReband.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks.